There is a big difference between demonstration and adaptation. And just because we don't demonstrate the strength does not mean that the strength adaptation did not occur. What's up, guys? Enkiri here, and today I want to talk a little bit about programming complexity versus simplicity. I sort of mentioned offhand in a video, I think it was last week or the week before that I once had a client, several years ago now, who was essentially being poached by a trainer at the gym that he lifted at. And so to convince my client that he should dump me as a coach, the trainer reviewed my client's program, the program that I wrote for him, and basically told him that the program was too simplistic to be valuable, and as such, it wasn't worth what the client was paying me for coaching. Never mind the incredibly obvious conflict of interest play here. It does bring up a very valuable topic that I want to dive into today, and that is complexity versus simplicity in your programming, and why it's a massive fallacy to make the program any more complex than it needs to be at any given stage of training. So here we have a trainer, the poacher, who most likely would add in a bunch of bells and whistles into the training program, even in the very early stages of training, because he's apparently under the impression that complexity for its own sake, complexity for complexity's sake, has value or even is a requirement in order to create a program that maximizes progress. I am not under this impression. In fact, I am under the impression that complexity for its own sake actually slows down progress and ultimately hinders your long-term progression. Now, in the case of the particular former client of mine in question, he was a rank fitness novice. He was a skinny fat dude, no muscle on his frame to speak of, very weak, very poor body control, poor mobility, etc., etc. Pretty much anything that you could need to work on, we needed to work on with him. So he needed to be given a few major pieces, right? Just a couple of them, maybe 3 or 4 principal components initially, and he needed to work on them until he had established some level of a foundation. Once that was accomplished, we would then work on expanding that foundation slightly. That is, we would add in a couple more novel principal components at this point to now work on, while now also simultaneously building up slightly on top of our newly laid foundation, the principal components that we had been working on initially. So we would simultaneously now begin progressing some of those exercises and movement patterns that we had laid our initial groundwork on, right? Building up, while also now building out, expanding the foundation, adding in a couple new things to begin to master as well. And by taking this highly simplistic but bit by bit approach, we are able to begin to take the initial steps toward eventual mastery, right? But it's important to remember that this is a process of time. You don't become a master of the weight room overnight. It takes months to reach a point of proficiency, and it takes years and years to reach a point of mastery. You can't sidestep or rush this process. You can try, but in my humble opinion, by doing so, you're actually going to end up making way less progress in the mid and those long-term periods, which are really the ones that matter in this game. Those first few months, the short term, are almost actually irrelevant if you haven't used them as an opportunity to lay the foundation that you're going to build off of in the future. Then on the other hand, if you take the approach of adding in complexity for its own sake, all that you actually end up doing is the equivalent of juggling too many balls at once. So what happens when you try to juggle more balls than you are capable of handling? You drop all of them. If the program that you are using manipulates variables to an extent beyond that which you require to make progress at any given stage, then you are hamstringing your progress, point blank. And the reason for this is very simple when you understand how progress occurs incrementally over time. So Think about how we add complexity to a training program, the variables that we manipulate to do this: volume, frequency, intensity, exercise rotation, etc., etc. The more adaptation cycles that somebody has run their body through, the more we must manipulate these variables in order to coax on further cycles of adaptation. It's the principle of diminishing returns at play in a very obvious fashion. Now, the inverse is also true. The less adaptation cycles that somebody has run their body through in any given endeavor, then the less that these variables need to be manipulated in order to coax adaptation. If you want to build muscle or get stronger or improve your conditioning, whatever your goal is, you should do the minimum amount of work possible in order to coax adaptation and work your way towards achieving this goal. If you do more work than you need at any given stage by lifting heavier than is required of you, or doing more volume than necessary, or more sessions than necessary, or swapping exercises in and out of the program unnecessarily, then you run the risk of walking yourself right into a corner, walking yourself right into an impenetrable brick wall. If I can build a 500-pound deadlift by working my way up to a solid double at 415 pounds, why the hell would I lift 430 pounds or 440 or 450 pounds? You don't get extra points for trying to jump over adaptation cycles. This isn't fucking checkers. You can't do that. All you get by doing more than required is that you miss the opportunity to have coaxed out another round of adaptations, another round of gains, to milk the gains while things are still easy. And so this is the style of training that I typically use with my clients who are actually in it, the ones who are actually serious about making real gains in the long run and who understand how the process actually works. Now, a particular client of mine, for example, he weighs about 200 pounds, and we built him up to a 500-pound deadlift. I think it took a year, maybe a year and a half tops. I don't even remember. And we did this without him ever deadlifting more than 415 pounds in training. The only time he ever pulled over 400 en route to his 500-pound deadlift was during the 2, maybe 3 test sessions that we did prior to that. He pulled singles of, I think it was 2 tests. I think he pulled 400 in his first test day, 450 in his second test day, 500 in his third test day. Outside of that, he had never touched 400 in training until that last training cycle, where he got to 415 for a double, and in his case, that yielded a 500-pound deadlift. Now, obviously, the specific numbers at play are going to vary from person to person, depending on factors that are outside the scope of this video. But the point is, I obviously knew during all of this time that he could pull way more than 415 for 2 reps. It was like a freaking RPE 8 when he did it. Maybe he's a 7, who the hell knows. But there was no point in him doing so, in him pulling more weight at that moment in time. Because for a whole year, we had been taking incremental, unimpeded, unyielding baby steps, right? Where the progress just keeps churning and churning and churning over and over. It never stops. I could have told him to load 440 instead of 415, but then what would have happened? We would have missed the opportunity to use 425 and 435 as building blocks. We would be trying to jump over adaptation cycles instead. And in doing so, we would miss the opportunity to make more gains, to coax more adaptations, right? There is a big, big difference between demonstration and adaptation. And just because we don't demonstrate the strength does not mean that the strength adaptation did not occur. It's like my man Mark Ripto always says, who wants to be a novice? You do. The reason being that progress is linear and predictable, and only small amounts of stress or stimulus are needed to coax adaptations to move you forward. If you could be a novice lifter who deadlifts 500 pounds, hey man, that's the best fucking thing in the world. I wish that was me, because that means that you have all this untapped potential, all this variable manipulation that you still get to play with to coax on these additional rounds and rounds and rounds of adaptation. You're still so far from your ceiling. Now, obviously, you can take that same novice lifter with a 500-pound deadlift and put him on a fancy program with all these different bells and whistles where we jack the volume way up, increase the frequency, rotate through different exercise variations every 4.6 seconds, and lift the heaviest weights that we can lift on any given day. But is he going to make more progress this way in the long run? Hard no. He is going to make less progress this way because you are going to be jumping over potential adaptation cycles. His body is either going to break from the massive increase in workload, or it's going to acclimate to that new increased workload. And in doing so, he's going to have missed out on the opportunity to have titrated these variables up slowly over time and milked every possible ounce of gains out along the way. Which actually leads me to what I want to talk about next week, and that is a case for why you should actually strive to train as little as possible. Do as little work as you can in the gym, as infrequently as you can get away with, and still make gains. So that'll be a fun one, a little bit of a spicy hot take for you. But complexity for its own sake is a fallacy. And it is one of the biggest mistakes that you can make in the gym if you're someone who is seeking to maximize your mid and your long-term progress, where the real gains are made. So don't listen to ignorant trainers who are trying to throw bells and whistles at you just because they think that it is a requirement for progress, or because something that is simple doesn't inherently have value just because it is simple. There is great value in simplicity when simplicity is what achieves the desired outcome. And to try to do more than required is actually, at any stage, is actually the ignorant route. When in doubt, just remember the KISS protocol, guys. Keep it simple, stupid. Anyway, that's all I got for today, guys. I hope you found this one helpful and informative and entertaining. And if you find yourself stuck in a cycle of plateaued progress in your training, be sure to check out my templates. These templates provide a reusable training program for you, while also acting as a teaching manual to help you learn how to master programming for yourself and make the absolute best long-term gains that you possibly can. Please remember to smash the like button before you go. Leave me some love in the comments down below, and check out EnkiriEliteFitness.com for online coaching, training programs, and informative articles as well. Keep training hard, and I will catch you guys next time.